All right, hello everybody. How you doing today? Hopefully you're doing good because you got to sit down for at least an hour, and maybe that's the reason some of you are here, just because you're tired of walking around. But even if that's why you're here, you're going to get a treat because you're going to learn some good information about how to make more money. Who is having a better year this year than they did last year in the audience? Who's having a worse year than they did last year? All right, I'm glad you're here. We're going to fix that for you. I've been in trucking 52 years. I may not look that old, but I was born to a trucker and got diesel in my blood from the day I came out of the womb. And so I've been around the industry a long time, and I can tell you that there's never been a better time in trucking than this year in the last 52 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about some data, statistics, and numbers. I'm going to go through some of that stuff with you and just help you understand where you're at. Some of you may be thinking about changing what you're doing for a living. As Jennifer said, some of you probably are thinking about getting your own authority. Some of you are thinking about being a company driver, for the last few years, and you hear all these guys making more money. Maybe you want to lease a truck and become an owner-operator. So I'm going to kind of talk through some of the numbers of how all those folks are doing. And then my good buddy Richard's going to come up here and actually give you some really good business tips about, how to make it through the good times and the bad times. So I'm going to start off just by talking about the market a little bit, because my guess is we've got everything from company drivers to owner-operators to fleet owners in here and people that work for fleets. So in trucking, there's about 2.5 million over-the-road truck drivers, Class 8, and about 2.2 million of them are company drivers. That's the vast majority. About 10% are owner-operators, so a little bit over 200,000 owner-operators. Our business concentrates on owner-operators, so that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about. And again, I'm just trying to give you a big picture because it helps you understand where you fit in and where you may want to go with your career. We look at things from a career life cycle perspective. You come into the business as a company driver, a lot of people stay there forever until they retire. And some move up through the food chain, and that's how big fleets like Werner and JB Hunt and a lot of those large fleets were born. Is they started out as a small truck owner and grew to massive fleets. So everybody, I believe, has that potential. So if you look at the truck market of owner-operators, about 260,000 trucks out there controlled by about 200,000 business owners. It's really split the way we look at it into a third, and a third. About 2/3 drive for motor carriers. They like operating under their authority. As Jennifer alluded to, you can get your own authority, but it's a lot easier to operate for a motor carrier, even though I'm an owner-operator. About a third of those are folks that go through a lease purchase program, so they will lease their truck from that motor carrier. Another third have their own truck, but they lease on that motor carrier. And then the last third are those folks that actually have their own authority. So just to kind of set the stage for you, from our perspective, we like to think of drivers not as just drivers, but what they actually do. So as we think about that chain of what I go through in my life cycle, a pioneer in our mind is that first truck driver that just leased their truck and just became an owner-operator. It's kind of like starting a brand new business, and we call them a pioneer for a reason, because it gives you the image of kind of the old West days when the pioneers set out from the East Coast and went to settle the West. It was a pretty rough ride. They're in covered wagons with horse and buggies, and a lot of them got killed because they didn't know what was going on in the adventure. And that happens today all the time with folks that go from company driver to owner-operator because they just have a hard time making that transition. One of our missions is helping folks understand business as they go along. You do that for a few years, you lease your truck, and you think, now's a good time, the market's good, there's used trucks out there, I'm going to go actually buy my own truck so I can take more charge of my business. And we call those guys hired guns. We call them hired guns because they still, even though they own their own truck outright, they got the title, they want to drive for that carrier because they like the convenience and comfort of that umbrella carrier doing a lot of the things for them. Ultimately, in a market like today, there are plenty of folks that go out and get their own authority. So we call them Lone Rangers because they're leaving the comfort of that security umbrella of the carrier, and they're going out and getting their authority, and they're doing it on their own, running their own business. And then ultimately, some wind up becoming trailblazers, and that's a multiple truck owner. We consider those people that have 5, 10, 20 trucks running a small fleet. Not too much about ATBS, but just so you understand where our information is coming from, we work with about 15,000 owner-operators, and we do all their books and their taxes for them. We have services on every end of the spectrum that do just books and taxes and process paper to we can incorporate you, we can do payroll for drivers that work for you and all those kinds of things and everything in between. So to kind of just talk a little bit about what's going on in trucking and how's the economic environment. I asked in the beginning, is anybody doing better this year than last year? And just about everybody in the room raised their hands. And I want to just kind of help you understand some of the things we pay attention to help our drivers understand the market. You can read the news today and listen to CNBC and news channels, and they talk about housing starts, and they talk about automobiles manufactured and all this interest rates, all this stuff going on, and none of it really, to me, makes a lot of sense anymore because there's just so much data and you don't know what it all means. This is one of my most favorite indexes in trucking. It's the Internet Truck Stop Market Demand Index. Comes out every single week. They're here. You can subscribe to a newsletter. And so briefly, what the ratio, I have a 36 ratio on the right-hand side, 36 times. What that essentially means is for every one load posted to the Internet Truck Stop, every 36 loads posted to the Internet Truck Stop, there's one truck out there looking for a load. So there's 36 loads for every one truck looking for a load. That's the big picture ratio in the country. My belief is that the red line up there at 12 is a break even for trucking. If I asked you guys how many of you are doing better this year than last year, and we go back kind of to 2008, which is kind of right down in that dip below the red line, 2009, 2010, that's when that ratio was below 12. You guys would be doing worse this year, but you can see that spike that we've had, and it's incredible how great things have been really for the last 8 to 10 months. We spiked all the way up to 70. That's the top line up there, which is unheard of. If you pay attention to the stock market at all, Dow Jones right now is around 25,000. That would be like Dow Jones 150,000 points. That's how robust the freight market was. It's fallen in half back to 36. So, that feels like things are slowing down and getting a little bit weak, but you got to keep it in perspective. Just look at that far right compared to the last 15 years of history. We're in the best freight environment we've ever been in. Just to kind of tie some numbers to that, this is from DAT, which is similar to truckstop.com, both load boards. And if you look at the rates going back to March of 2017, so a little over a year, 3 months ago, kind of when the market bottomed, kind of the crappy freight market bottomed, dry vans were at $1.63, flatbeds were at 202, and refrigerated was $1.86. You fast forward to the spring of this year when we were at that 70 market demand index, and you look at what rates did. We're up to 218 in dry van, 270 in flatbed, and 248 in reefer. So rates are up 30%. Again, that's unheard of. In my 52 years of paying attention to trucking, if rates went up 4, 5, 8 cents, we were pretty excited in this business. So to have rates up 30% is unbelievable. And really the question I think most people I'm talking to these days is they wonder how long this is going to last. It's so good. It's so fun. It's like the party's at its peak and we just don't want it to end. Who's going to shut the beer off because we don't want to go home. We just want to keep doing this as long as we can. So how are you guys as individual owner-operators doing? We're lucky at ATBS because we have a mass of data, really the biggest mass of data in the world on owner-operators. And so we take that data and we crunch it and we create benchmarks to help you understand where you might stack up and if you're doing better or worse than others in the industry. If you're doing worse, you can find ways to improve. If you're doing better, keep doing more of it. So I'm going to start off with miles. The average owner-operator is running, this is year-over-year data. So the gold bars start in June of this year, and the black bars are June of this year, the gold bars are June of last year. So we look at this year versus last year, going back year-over-year. So it's really crazy to me to look at that, and miles are actually down 2.5% to 108,000 miles. That's what the average owner-operator is running. If I think about that, we're in the best times that have ever been. And if I'm a businessman, I want to make all the money I can during the best times there's ever been. So you'd think I'd be working really hard. But we've seen this time and again, and I'll show you a slide in just a second. Actually, I'll just flip to it right now. This slide shows you 15 years of mileage history. And what we find out over 15 years, I was really kind of befuddled the first couple times I saw it, but what happens when times are good is owner-operators, number one, I think they get a little more picky and they start looking for the better freight. They don't want to work as hard. They work really hard every single day, and they'd rather make a higher rate per mile and run less miles. Plus, they've been working their butt off for 3 years to get through kind of the rough times we had up until last year. And so they just want a little time off. They want to be at home to watch their kids' football game or go fishing. And so miles actually go down. You can see on the far right of that slide, during the slow freight times of 16 and 17, we kind of miles picked up because guys had to run money to make truck payments. Now we're slowing it down again. So it's really kind of interesting. If we look at revenue per mile, we show the revenue per mile average up 12 cents a mile. The average owner-operator is running $1.44. You can see on the far right, just because you're probably in one of those segments, if you're in dry, flat, or refrigerated, you can see what those rates are. Independent, so those are all drivers leased to fleets. If you look at the independents, those are guys that are the hired guns or the trailblazers that have their own authority. So you can kind of see the differential in the rates. You know, one thing that has blown my mind this year is the flatbed business is just unbelievable. People are making crazy money in the flatbed business. So I'm going to go back real quick and just touch on the fact that we're up almost 10% in rates by 12 cents a mile. You know, it's great. It's because we're in an industry on fire. But a big piece of it is the top of that chart, which is the DOE national average fuel price. Fuel's gone up. We all know that. We're spending more money on fuel. And so a piece of that is because fuel's gone up. And I'll tell you a little bit more specific about that in a minute. So this chart is going to help me talk to you guys that have been owner-operators, company drivers, and you're thinking about, do I get my own authority? You know, what should I do right now? Because the market's crazy. I keep hearing my buddy in the truck stop saying he's running loads for $2.50 a mile, and you know, I'm only making $1.60 a mile. And people in a market like this kind of get in that mindset. So I'm big on break-even lines. The gold line up there is a break-even line. So if I'm a guy or a gal with an owner-operator running for a fleet, and I'm making $1.40, $1.45 per mile. If I want to go out and do this on my own, get my own authority, a lot changes. I got to get my own trailer. I got to get my own insurance. I got to, you know, book my own loads. I'm going to have some bad debt because some of those people aren't going to pay me. And so in our mind, on the bottom of there, it costs about $45,000 for me to go out and actually do this on my own and run my own business. That translates to about 42 cents a mile. So that gold bar is that 42 cents a mile. That's a break even. You can look through time and kind of see where the break even was. We came out of that break even kind of, you know, mid 2017 and into 2018, and we're at the highest break even, above the break even we've ever been. We're almost 90 cents above that. And let me just show you the next slide to kind of translate that. So in today's world, if I'm leased onto a fleet, the average rate's going to be between $1.40 to $1.60, somewhere in that range, depending on the freight we haul. If I'm in the spot market, I'm making $2.30 a mile, almost $90,000 more per year if I'm running 100,000 miles a year. That's a lot of money. I just said I'm going to have to probably spend 40 to 50 grand to do that. So the net might be somewhere between $30 to $50,000. That entices a lot of people to do just what Jennifer said on the stage before me: get my own authority and go, you know, be my own guy. This is the market I can do that in. I can be my own boss. So one thing I really want you to think about is Richard's going to, you know, dive much deeper into this, but this is a cyclical business. It goes up and down. The pendulum swings right and it swings left. We're in the best times we've ever been. So I can assure you, whether you're smart or not, you'll probably make money with your own authority for the next 6 months. But we're going to hit the bad times, and we're going to, you know, pendulum's going to swing left. And what you really got to think about is being prepared for those bad times, because that's when a lot of folks that have gone out, got their own authority, borrowed some money, bought a trailer, you know, puts a home mortgage or whatever they did to get in that business, they go broke and they lose everything. So you got to be prepared and make sure you make that step the right way. But it's a market that you can do it in for sure. If we look at gross revenue, the average gross revenue is up 10%, 6.5% to $155,000. Again, in the bottom right, you can kind of see by segment how the revenue breaks out. If I look at fuel costs, they're up. We all know, you know, fuel's been going up for the last 14 months. It's over $3 a gallon. And so my average fuel costs for an owner-operator are up 6 cents a mile to about 44 cents a mile. So a key slide for me is kind of looking at what happened with revenue per mile versus fuel per mile. And so this slide tells us that I already talked about revenue per mile going up 12 cents, fuel going up 6 cents. The net difference is about 6 cents. So that tells me truly we've had a 6 cent per mile rate increase this year versus last year from June. But that's real dollars. If you look on the far right, I'm making $9,400 in revenue, but my fuel's only costing me $5,900. That's about a net increase of right around $3,500. That's why things are good in trucking right now. That's why the truck show is crowded. That's why people are looking for trucks. I might be upgrading my truck. Things are really good right now. A lot of people don't understand fuel surcharges. I don't have time to go through the complex calculations with you, but a lot of people feel like they get screwed by fuel surcharges. And so fuel surcharges are calculated. Every load in the country probably has a fuel surcharge that gets calculated a different way. So I just want to give you some benchmarks. This is data. We track about 50 fleets every week because we get drivers that call and want to know if they're getting a fair fuel surcharge. So this is August 13th, a couple weeks ago. The average fuel surcharge was 33.2 cents a mile, but we had a range. We had as low as 14.7 cents a mile. We had as high as 41.6 cents a mile. So somewhere in that range is a reasonable fuel surcharge. What you got to understand is if you're getting paid a fuel surcharge, what's the base rate? Because all in, the rate should, add up to be something that you can make money with. Just to give you a benchmark for miles per gallon, we track our drivers' miles per gallon. Again, the black is 2018, the gold is 2017, and different segments. So the good news is we see a lot of times when freight's good, we see people drive faster. They want to haul more freight and make more money, but it's kind of an offset because fuel's over $3 a gallon, so people are kind of miles per gallon conscious. So in all segments, we see people gaining miles per gallon this year. They're managing their fuel. They're paying attention to it, except in the flatbed business. I think things are so crazy and good in the flatbed business. I don't think flatbedders care. They're making so much money. They're just running, doing whatever they can to haul more freight. Truck payments. So this is a time in the market where a lot of people think, I put off buying a new truck. I wasn't making enough money. Maybe I'll get one now. I just want to give you some benchmarks. You go back 15 years ago, our average client was paying around $1,500 a year for a truck. Today, that's crept up. It's all the way up to about $2,400 per month. So trucks have gotten expensive. The biggest reason they have, a lot of people blame truck manufacturers, but it's really the government. They have these EPA mandates, and every time they have one, you can see the price of fuel spike as we have to meet new EPA mandates with these engines. If I look at maintenance, something that's a little bit worrisome for me right now, back in the old days, 15 years ago, we told the average driver, set aside about 7 or 8 cents a mile in your maintenance escrow, you'll be fine and you'll cover whatever comes your way. That crept up as we started getting those EPA engines in here, and they got more expensive, and DPFs and ECMs and all this stuff that goes out. So maintenance went up to about 10 cents a mile kind of during the recession. Then it kind of leveled off there. But if you look on the far right-hand side, just this year, we've seen a spike of almost a cent per mile, and I haven't quite figured out why. I don't think we've had significant truck changes. What I really think it is a lot of people put off upgrading trucks during the slow freight times of 16 and 17, and the maintenance is catching up with them. So it's kind of one of those things you really need to be thinking about, my truck versus my maintenance cost, and this is a time for me to get into a newer or a new truck. So net income, what's the bottom line? This is what matters to all of us. This is what we use to pay the bills and retire on and save and all those kinds of things. This is great news. This is the biggest jump we've ever seen in net income year over year. The average owner-operator is making $62,750 roughly, up 5.2%, 5.6%. If you look at the bottom right, again, you can gauge where you're doing in what segment of the industry. I go back to the flatbedders, they're up $10,000 to $76,000. We have drivers today that are making six figures, which I've never, we used to have a handful, maybe 0.1%, but we have many drivers making six figures. It's just an awesome time to be in the trucking business. People are doing really, really well. So if I just look at the long-term trend of net income, because a lot of times it's easy to get discouraged in this business, things are going to slow down. We all know the pendulum's going to swing and it's going to get tough again, but you got to look at the long-term trends. And you think back 2003, 15 years ago, the average owner-operator was making 35 cents a mile, and they're making about $4,000 a month. We've almost doubled that on a per mile basis. We're running less miles and making more money. And today we're making 60 grand a year instead of 48 grand a year. So that's a good thing. This is one of my favorite slides because what it really tries to do is look at the work-life balance. How much are you going to pay me for how much work I got to do? And if I look at the top, it's unbelievable for me to think about back when we got in business. The average owner-operator ran 139,000 miles a year. I know before me they had ELD folks on the stage talking about your logs, and there's no way you could log 139,000 miles a year, but back in those days, people did it. That's how you made money. You just shut the door, put the pedal down, and you ran. Today, I already said we're running 108,000 miles a year. On the flip side, 15 years ago, drivers were making $47,000. Today, they're making $63,000. So if I think about that, over a 15-year time period, I'm working 22% less. And don't take it to say that drivers don't work hard. You work harder than anybody I know. You legally can drive 70 hours a week, and then you work after that on your truck and your business. So you work really hard, but you're driving less, which is nice. You're home more often. So I'm working 22% less as far as miles go, but my pay has gone from 48 grand to 63 grand, which is a 34% increase. So that's a good trend. And what it tells me is over time, things have gotten better for owner operators. That's why more people want to get into this business, lease a truck, finance a truck, and growing their business. So if I look at the population of owner-operators, I get this from my good buddy Max, who introduced me, and they do a study every year. We can see back in the early days, we had 238,000 owner-operators. Then through the dot-com kind of free money, early 2000s, we financed a bunch of owner-operators we shouldn't have, and we grew the population like crazy to 279,000. Then the Great Recession hit, and poof, 25% of those folks just evaporated. They lost their business because they really didn't have a good business foundation or put money down on it. We've grown over the last 5 years out of the Great Recession. We've grown that population back up to 268,000. So the good news is the economics are good for owner-operators, and more folks are getting into that business. So just to wrap up, if you're thinking about becoming an owner-operator, I don't think there's ever been a better time. There's a huge amount of, not a huge amount, but there's some really quality used trucks on the market at a great price. So you can get a truck. There's a lot of money willing to finance you. The government attack we faced for a lot of years. The IC model was under attack by the government. There's a lot of new tax incentives. I did a tax seminar yesterday. There's a lot of things that advantage you as an owner-operator. The most simple thing is per diem went away for company drivers. That's a horrible deal. It's going to cost you more in taxes, but owner-operators still get a per diem deduction. We can talk more about that afterwards if you want. The challenge for our industry is there's no truck drivers that are coming into our industry, and so that's actually not a bad thing for all of us that are already in the industry. It kind of keeps a lid on capacity so we can't grow a lot of trucks and over-truck and have the market go back down. So it's a good time to be an owner-operator. So I'm going to wrap up with just some predictions. Every year we do a benchmark seminar like this, and we kind of predict what's going to happen this year. The first thing we said back in January was we're not going to know what the ELD really means until we get to summertime. And we were right. We didn't find that out, but that's when we saw that 70 market demand index. We found out there was a lot of freight, and folks slowed down. They couldn't run illegally, and so there wasn't enough capacity, and so the market got really hot. We said net income is going to grow significantly throughout 2018. We're seeing that. I showed you the numbers, and it's not going to stop. It's going to keep growing. My guess is by the time we get to the end of this year, the average owner-operator is going to be at $65,000 net income. When, not too long ago, they were making $50,000. It's great. Income is growing significantly. One thing that's a little bit of a shocker for me is typically in times like this, we see the grass is greener mentality. We see these $15,000 sign-on bonuses. We see pay increases, and we see drivers kind of getting itchy feet and saying, man, they're offering more over there. I'm going to quit. I'm going to go do this. And we see a lot of turnover. We have really seen the owner-operator base stay put because they're doing well. They're making money doing what they're doing, and they realize if I transition during time like this and it takes me a month to change from this to that, I'm missing a month of one of the best freight markets there's ever been. And so the turnover has really not happened among owner-operators. One thing I do know and one thing I've seen is there's a lot of fleets here, and we have a lot of fleet partners. The fleets that are growing their owner-operator base are the ones that are helping you participate in this great market the most, which are typically the percentage pay fleets. They're the ones that, as market rates go up every single day, you're getting a percent of that. They're growing capacity. A lot of the fleets that are paying, per mile pay that adjust, but they adjust kind of in arrears once a quarter or something like that, they're not growing their capacity as fast. We're seeing a lot of lease purchase programs. Those kind of went away for a little while during the freight recession a few years ago, but we're seeing a lot come back. You walk around here and you see lease purchase programs everywhere. So we're seeing a lot of drivers migrate into those. Lastly, my prediction, biggest question of the day is how long is this party going to last? Who's going to shut the beer off? I'll stand up here and tell you, I believe pretty firmly it's going to last at least through middle of next year with the depreciation incentives, the economic incentives, everything that's going on. We're in good times, and there's nothing barring some kind of terrorist act or something crazy that could happen. If things just continue like they are, I think we're well into next year before this ends, maybe even to 2020. So work hard, make money when you can, because things never last. With that, I'm going to introduce my friend Richard DeForest, who's going to kind of talk to you about how you keep this going. Thank you.
Nice job.
Hey, man.
Hi, everybody. Gosh, thanks for coming today. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Todd's my boss, so I don't like to flatter him, but that's pretty remarkable that he gave us that mountain of information without once looking at a note. And he did the same thing yesterday. I see a few faces here from yesterday when he did the same thing with taxes yesterday, taxes for truckers. So pretty remarkable. Let me get started here. I think we can open this up for questions after this, if there are any. And I hope the questions go to Todd and you try to stump him over there, okay? We've been lucky enough to be invited back to do this. Max and Emily from Randall Riley and James have invited us back for many years now. And usually at this point of the partners in business, we start talking about business tips, how to raise your income, or your revenue, how to lower your cost, and maybe even how to save on taxes. But this year, because as Todd pointed out, things are so good, we're going to do it a little different this year and talk about something else. As Todd said, it's a great time to be an owner-operator. They've never made more money, and it's not always about money, but this gives you more control over your life and lets you make more decisions for yourself. That's what that does. Trucking is a great time to be an owner-operator, yeah, but trucking has always been a series of pendulum swings. That's what trucking's all about. And here's some of the past pendulum swings that some of you have been through. Is there anybody in the room that's been doing this for 20 years? I see some hands going up. Yeah. That's when Todd Amon started this business, was 20 years ago. So we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. And if you look back to the same year, 1998, fuel was $1.01 a gallon. And that was the first year of the Driver Appreciation Week, was 1998, the same year. And for you folks that have been in this business a long time, what you've seen is 3 recessions, and you've seen fuel double, triple, quadruple. During Hurricane Katrina in August of 2005, 13 years ago, fuel hit $5 a gallon. Think of that. And you folks have had to adjust and react to that, and you come through it. And other things have happened, like I mentioned, 3 recessions. We've seen hours of service changes. Put it up. Okay, thanks. We've seen hours of service changes. Is that better? Okay. So the hours of service was a big deal. That slide that Todd showed you with the miles and how they decreased, that was a big impact on that. Just this year we saw the ELD mandate. But somehow you guys got through this, and here you are today. Trucking has always been a series of pendulum swings. And this isn't about a list of predicting the future that's up there now. The previous slide was the past. I'll go back to that. And this is not about predicting the future, because you think about it, who could predict 10 years ago that we'd see a big sign like that on a 53-foot trailer that's in reaction to the driver shortage? I mean, that stuff like this can't be predicted. But the other things on this list are actually being discussed and planned and talked about, and some of those are actually implemented already. Some of that's already happening. And the key is that how we prepare, how we adjust, how we adapt, that's what makes the difference. And you folks are adaptable. So this isn't meant to sound like preaching or that sort of thing where we're trying to give you a certain message like that. That's not what it's about. But what this is instead of preaching, maybe there's 1 or 2 things on here that might help somebody down the road. And I'll just go through these real briefly here with you to give you an idea why they're up there. But write down clear long-term objectives. And I wanted to start with this because it's so interesting, because it doesn't cost anything and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. But what's really interesting, and very few people are willing to do this, but they found in studies that those that do this sort of thing are much more successful in certain areas. Balance the budget. We believe in this so much at ATBS that over 90% of our clients get a budget from us. We call it a profit plan. But this is one of the keys to helping them succeed, is this budget that we provide. And what it is, it's like a roadmap. Is how do you want to get from where you live to Dallas, Texas. And if you drove, you followed a road map. And this is a similar situation. How do you get from where you are today to where you want to be? And buy everything with cash, and that's easy to say, and it sounds kind of intimidating at times, but the Federal Reserve did a study and found that 69% of the people pay with cash or a debit card. And banks consider a debit card a cash transaction. So 69% are already doing it. So maybe it's not out of reach to think about ways to do that. Pay off credit accounts each month. The credit reporting agencies say that the average credit card balance is $6,300. And that's a lot of money, that's for sure. But, that's a lot of money for sure. But if you think about it, in this day and age, the numbers that Todd showed you, if you could take $500 a month and apply it to that, you'd have it paid off in less than a year. It's doable, in other words. Repair credit now. This is kind of a sad story because the credit reporting agencies say that good credit is 701 to 749. And yet, they also tell you that 1/3 of Americans have a credit score of 601 or less. And where that comes into play is yesterday I was talking to one of the finance companies out here, and I said, what's the minimum credit score you'll look at? 625 was the answer I got. So you can see those 1/3 of the population that's under 601 going to have a hard time financing a truck, and it limits their other choices. And sometimes, because they don't have a lot of money and they don't have a good credit score, that means they pay more for things like insurance or interest if they go to finance something. Pay down or eliminate debt. And with this one can be broken down perhaps and pay off the smallest one first, then pay off the one with the highest rate of interest second. And if you do it like that, maybe that makes the rest of it easier to attack and pay off. Purchase essential tools and equipment, and that's where you separate what you want from what you need. And what you need is look at those things that are going to increase revenue the most or decrease cost the most. And sell idle equipment, even if it's paid for, there's a cost. And sometimes that cost is just lot rot, and sometimes the cost is the time it takes to mow around something that's parked in your backyard. There's a cost to that too, that kind of thing. Get caught up on old tax issues, and the IRS likes to throw around big numbers and scare the heck out of us. And they'll tell you there's 8.2 million people that owe $83 billion in back taxes and interest and penalties. Now, I can't make a dent in $83 billion, but when you do the math and break it out, that's $10,000 per person, okay? So if you're one of those folks, $500 a month again, which is doable right now before the pendulum swings back, $500 a month would let you pay that off in less than 2 years. Give some money to charity, and it's just human nature that you become a little stronger if you help somebody else out, perhaps with a local charity. Our company, ATBS, because of Todd's sponsorship, we work with 2 local charities, a women's shelter and a veterans support group. And when you get involved with folks like this, it makes you stronger and just better able to handle things that come at you in the future. Read a business book or take an online course. There's so much out there that the hard part might be where to start, but this is something that works in your favor because truckers generally have a lot of downtime. And it doesn't take a lot of time, only a little bit of time, 15, 30 minutes a day. But this kind of thing can help you get ready for the future, of course. And that next one, get married and get a tax deduction. That's nonsense. I kind of made that up to make sure you're paying attention. But if there's any gals out there that want to talk to me about this after this is over, well, let me know. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So, and reward yourself. And this is pretty important because sometimes we get in the mode of just work, 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 and more work. And a guy named Richard Stocking, when he was the CEO of Swift, said that fortunes aren't made in the good times. They're made by surviving the bad times. And you guys have already done that, okay? So I'm hoping that you can perhaps talk your tax accountant into letting you write off that new pair of sunglasses or something like that. A few months ago, Netflix had a documentary on Henry Ford, and that was really interesting. And a few months before that, Todd and I were in Detroit, and we had 6 hours to kill before our flight home. So we decided to go to the Henry Ford Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. Highly recommend it because you come away from that respecting Henry Ford a lot for his work ethic and his knowledge and the adversity that he encountered. I mean, unions were just coming in at that time, and that was a big deal to be able to deal with that sort of thing. And so when he says something like this, it kind of sticks. If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. Well, some of the things on that previous list might be hard to do, and everybody would agree with that. And again, it's not about preaching or anything, just to give somebody ideas that might help them for the future. But this is still a great time to tackle those things. So with that said, good luck and safe travels, and thank you very much. And we'll open it up for questions if you have any. Thank you. Don't forget, Todd's still got his mic on, so you can ask him. So, anything at all? All right. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.